the EE Times, and welcome to this edition of Silicon Grapevine. Today I'm speaking to Russ Garcia, who's the CEO of Menlo Micro. Russ, hello.
Hi, Nitin. Thanks for having me today.
Good. Yeah, no, my pleasure. Russ, tell me a little bit about yourself. You're CEO of Menlo Micro. Tell us how that's going.
Well, it's going great right now. We started the company in 2016. Few years of development, but the last 3 years we've been growing revenues and starting to see some of the fruits of the labor of bringing a new technology to market.
You've been with it since the founding, around 2016, as you said. What are the key achievements over this period, of Menlo Micro, you think, that under you?
Well, okay. Well, I think the first big achievement was there's not too many companies these days, especially in the semiconductor industry, that are bringing new material science to bear. And so
that's we don't care about.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
Yeah.
Maybe they take a long time, which they do take a long time, because there's all of the things that you don't know, right? And we always use that cliche as, about the things that we don't know, but there's a lot of them. And so when we actually commercialized this, the MEMS part of this, we commercialized, it came up much faster than I thought. What actually was the hard part was packaging. And so anyway, there was a bunch of physics along with that, and that's taken a few extra years, but we're ramping. We've got a very differentiated technology ramping in production right now.
So you think you've nailed it for now?
I never would say nailed it, but we're doing well. We've got a reliable product that's ramping and scaling.
All right, let's take you back a little bit. Did you study electronics? Yeah.
So I graduated in a long time ago, in '82, with my electrical engineering degree. My father was an electrical engineer. My uncle was an electrical engineer at the Air Force Weapons Lab. And yeah, I think so. I've lived in a family of engineers for a long time. I started Hughes Aircraft, working on radar systems and manpack radios.
How did you get that first job?
I got that first job actually in university, so I did an internship, and I'm a big fan of interns. As a matter of fact, we hire quite a lot of interns at Menlo, and a good portion of them end up becoming permanent employees, and that's how I started.
So you took the internship, and then they took you on after your graduation?
Took me on after my graduation, and then of course for me, I grew up in New Mexico, so the lure of the gold of California.
And that's quite interesting, because I think we had a chat earlier, you've never been more than 30 minutes away from home in California.
Yeah, so I think I'm a unicorn as far as that goes. I've worked at least, I don't know, 6 or 8 companies in Southern California area. I've lived within probably a 10-mile radius for all that time, and I've always been within 30 minutes of work, and so very lucky as far as that.
So what did you do at Hughes? Oh, by the way, I also went through an internship, and I think they're quite good, because I was at doing 2 years of university electronics, and thought there's too much physics here. So then I said, okay, let's go get a year out. So I worked at National Semiconductor. The only thing is, they didn't have a job for me afterwards, because it was one of the boom and bust. We were on the bust cycle. So yeah, but it is a good, solid experience.
Oh yeah, and so back then Hughes was kind of a training ground of engineers. I think it was the largest employer in California, certainly technical employer in California at one time. However, I started looking around for other things that I wanted to do. I actually got a headhunter call for Plessey Semiconductors, and Plessey had a.
So how long were you at Hughes before?
I was only at Hughes for about 3 years.
Okay, and what are you doing there? What was your job?
I was a design engineer for test systems, so for manpack radio test systems and radar test systems.
Okay, so you've got a history in test as well as
I've got a history in test, build from scratch test, if you will.
Yeah.
And anyway, got a call from this headhunter, and this little company called Plessey Semiconductors that I had never even heard of at that point in time. They sold a lot of log amplifiers and phase lock loops and stuff to aerospace and defense. So they had a small facility in Irvine, California. Looked interesting, was a big raise, so I went over there. That was where I discovered, and I wish I could remember the gentleman's name. There was an applications engineer that I know some of your older listeners might recognize, but in any case, I started touring the countryside with him, learned a ton, not of just engineering, but how to interface with customers, and found out the business side of the thing was more my forte. Now, another gentleman that some people might recognize, a gentleman named Alistair Manley, was running marketing for that group back then, and he said, "Russ, maybe you ought to come over to the marketing side." I said, "I don't know if I want to go over to the dark side."
At that time, engineers always thought marketing was a dark side.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then you find out you can't really do marketing in this business without being an engineer. It's certainly very difficult.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I spent a few years at Plessey and got my feet wet on the marketing side of things. So
I mean, what, several years there, I guess.
I was there. I was there. Till it was about another 3 years there.
Okay.
Then Ferranti Interdesign, they bought Ferranti Interdesign, and they were going to move from Irvine to Scotts Valley.
Yeah.
Flew me up there, drove around, looked at it. It looked like kind of a neat area, and then I thought, I like sunny Southern California. I got another phone call from a company that was, I think they were about $10 million of revenue at the time, a company called Silicon Systems. They were a leading seller of electronics for rotating memory or disk drives.
Okay.
And that's where I really kind of grew. It was kind of the first big growth spurt in my career. Stayed in that for
growth in what way? In terms of your skills, or in terms of just like networks and
everything.
Okay.
I think skills, management capability, networks, all of that. And there's several individuals through that, because started as Silicon Systems, and then in '96, Silicon Systems was TI's first big semiconductor acquisition. And so through Silicon Systems, some of your listeners may remember a guy named Jim Peterson, or Jimmy P, who is the CEO of Micro Semi.
Yeah.
Where I later ended up. He was the VP of sales at that time. Another gentleman named Carm Santoro was the CEO. He ended up being CEO of AST and Dallas Semiconductor later on. Yeah. And then another gentleman, Rick Gerner. So those guys were some early mentors. The person who was leading the acquisition for TI at the time, so Del Whitaker, who ran the analog group for TI back then. Rich Templeton was running DSP. The CFO at that time was Rick Clemmer. And so Rick Clemmer, who ended up being president of NXP, was also one of my chairmen of board of one of the startup companies around. So living through and learning from those groups of people was
fascinating.
It was fascinating and irreplaceable.
Any interesting stories from that?
Oh, plenty of interesting stories. I'm not sure which ones I want to tell you, but anyway, it was a good time for me. I learned the nuts and bolts of hardcore semiconductors, probably from Carm, Jim, and Rick in the Silicon Systems days, because those early Silicon Systems days we were still, running really hard, and I think it grew from about, when I joined, I think I said it was about $10 million or so. It was about $400 million in revenue by the time we sold it to it was sold to TI. Seagate was a huge customer of ours. Maxtor, still have a relationship with Finest Connor. So that was pretty good. But then the executive management piece, I think that mentorship really came out of TI. TI was
I've heard that a lot from a lot of people who I've interviewed have been at TI.
Look at all the CEOs that are out there. So, so Greg Waters, Greg Lowe, Clemmer, all these guys, Templeton's still there. There's a myriad of pretty successful executives that came out of that era of TI.
Yeah. And then you went on to Microsemi then.
So actually, when I left, my first stints in startups came before Microsemi. So I left TI in 2000, and I went to join a company that was just starting out called UNAV Microelectronics, and there was a small design house in Finland, right across the street in Tampere, Finland, right across the street from Nokia, who had invented an all CMOS capability for GPS, which back then, by CMOS was as close as you could get, and I think Rockwell had this gigantic chipset that cost an arm and a leg, and so that experience was one, and we did a great job on the silicon side. We did not understand the user interface side, and subsequently, I'll say it was mildly successful. It sold to Atheros. Took some time off at the advice of my chairman at the time, Rick Clemmer. Yep. And then I ran another startup company called Wispry, which was my first. Wispry. Okay. And Wispry was one of the companies that tried to build contact switch MEMS.
Okay.
Was not able to be successful with that, so instead of having a contact switch, they put a dielectric on the contacts, and then we had a switch capacitor.
Okay.
Those were the first forays into even what Qorvo does today in cell phones, right? So to do really high Q switch capacitors, and so ran Wispry for about 4 years, and then Jim Peterson talked me into joining Microsemi. That was an experience. I had
transformative.
And for me, it was the opposite.
Which we say you grew up.
I think I grew up a lot in those days. Although the first two startup companies is how my hair got white, but at least that's what my wife says. Yeah. The Microsemi piece. So Microsemi was on this terror of acquisitions, and Jim called me several times and said, I said, really don't want to be a diode company. And finally talked me into joining. Actually, that's where I met another gentleman who's actually on my board now. Steve Litchfield was the CSO at the time over there. He's at Max Linear these days. About 2 weeks in, Jim pulls me in with him and Steve. He says, now I want to tell you why I really hired you. You've been an IC guy. We're a diode guy. We need an IC guy instead of a discrete person, and because we're buying Actel. And I said, what? So FPGAs and diodes, it was brilliant. And the brilliance around it was there was zero technology overlap, and there was about 80% customer overlap, and it just worked beautifully. And then there was 2 or 3 others after that. I had the pleasure of running these companies for a year or so and shaping them and integrating them, which I think was
your role was operations, or
my role was actually EVP of marketing.
Okay.
And the hardest part to integrate was sales and marketing.
Yeah.
But I basically I got a lot of general management experience in running those companies, and they were very diverse. We had Actel, Zarlink, and Symmetricom, all completely different.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, Xilinx was like from the Plessey Semiconductor.
Exactly. That was kind of fun too, because after we bought them, there was several folks that I had known from early in my career that were still there. So
Sometimes even like you work with companies and then you think, what happened to them? But because you have people. But the thing is, sometimes you distance yourself and then you think,
right.
I've discovered this a few times in the last few weeks where, oh, I didn't realize that was the reason they went there, because it's for a defense contract.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So you say it was transformative. So then did you feel like, okay, that I've had enough, I've burnt out, or did you just sort of find this next opportunity?
I think I said I got my hair became white because of the first two startups, but I really enjoyed that time. I enjoyed being down in the trenches, building things from scratch, building teams. I had learned quite a bit in the first two, but part of why I had left is the opportunity cost is really high. And so being in corporate versus a startup, it's there's a big shift in lifestyle, thinking on lifestyle. And so thinking and lifestyle, that's a great way to put it. And so I wanted to get back into that small game. One of my good friends and investor even in Menlo, Paul Conley, and I had talked about, how do you have a portfolio or participate in multiple startups? I was actually starting to do that and was an advisor on several and a couple boards and things like that. And
that's kind of an EIR role.
Yes, exactly. And so
entrepreneur in residence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was kind of in process of networking for more of that, and I happened to be at a GSA conference, and GE was presenting this MEMS technology for IoT, and there's this big power company. I said, I got to go check this out, and I'd run this MEMS company. And that's how Menlo. That's how I got involved with Menlo.
What do you think your biggest achievements through your career? I mean, I know you're at Menlo Micro now, and typical CEO will say, yeah, I did this here. But look at your whole sort of career. What do you feel like are the biggest things? I know you said there's transformative period, but what about what you feel like? I feel really good about that.
That's a great question. I guess probably two places, if I don't count Menlo, because I think Menlo for me is, and I'll add that in on the last. So first, in the Silicon Systems days, they were basically, when I joined there, they were making preamps, and basically these are amplifiers that get put on a head arm assembly for a disk drive to read the magnetic recording off the disk. The goal of the company was to expand the electronics into the rest. I feel like I was very instrumental in both the strategy and roadmap to do that, but the interaction of those key customers like Seagate to pull that together, and that was, it felt like there was a mark because of that. So that would be the first one. The second one is really what I mentioned with Micro Semi, the ability to get, when you look at the integrator of one of these acquisitions, they can either be an integrator or a hatchet man. Yep. Because in either case, if you're doing it right, you're probably losing 20 or 30% of the head.
Naturally or having to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I felt like we had put together, between myself and a team, where we were actually able to go reset goals, go through that hard part of those layoffs or cuts or redundancies, I think is the nice way to say it.
Yes.
Yeah, and still come out with strong leadership where the resultant felt good about where we were going. And to me, that was a huge accomplishment in especially those three acquisitions there. Then with Menlo, building something completely from scratch, and I didn't invent it. Chris Keimel invented it. Chris Giovanello, the other co-founder, really pulled together a lot of the original ideas. But being able to pull the level of perseverance that you have to have to, we went through everything from, we were going to start production actually in Schenectady in a research fab. I don't advise anybody ever do that. but we were building our first products. There was a leak in the ceiling, contaminated half of the equipment, and shut us down. Yeah. Stories like that you have to get through that only happen in a true startup. It's where you're not doing not knocking people that have done some novel designs and taken them to TSMC. There's been some great companies built that way, but building up that material science and living through what it's like to be in quote unquote a garage is quite an experience.
I've been through it. I know many people we've interviewed have been through it, so we get that. On the personal side, what are your hobbies? What do you like?
Actually, I like spending time with my grandkids.
Okay.
My wife and I try to do that as much as we can. We like to travel. Our favorite place is Hawaii.
It's not too far from you.
Man, it's not bad. We're beach people, so I think that's
A bit of surfing.
No, I don't do anything. I tried when I was younger. I learned very quickly. Absolutely. I like to play golf every once in a while as well.
So golf, I think, is that sort of pastime which a lot of CEOs actually probably do. So in terms of life lessons, what would you say to a young Russ, if you sort of what you know now? What would you tell young Russ? What would be your advice to him?
So I've had several people, of course, that say, "Hey, how do I do what you did?" And obviously you have to plan and prepare, and you have to have a set of goals and a vision. But coupled with that is really the ability to be an opportunist. And if you look at a number of the companies I've been involved with, they were maybe early stage and growing through some things. There's quite a bit of chaos in that. People don't typically like chaos, but chaos is where opportunity comes from. And so being able to recognize, hey, there's the opportunity, I'm going to go jump on that and move forward with it, is probably been the biggest benefit to me.
Excellent. Well, Russ Garcia, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.